Pleasure to meet you all. So my name is Marquis Jones, and my background is in computer engineering, electrical and computer engineering. So it's kind of a combination of computer science and electrical engineering mashed together. I started out, went to Marquis for high school, but before that, well, while I was in high school, I worked for a company called Sonari Systems, which is a local startup here in Little Rock, back in the 80s, the old days for you guys. So I was writing software professionally as a high school student. She hired me after I went to a summer program at Euler, the CEO of Sonari. And so she was basically a Montessori school teacher that hired high school hackers to write professional software for education. So we wrote software for little kids. Like a Bluetooth speaker somewhere. Anyway, so we wrote software for little kids, nursing programs, and just general education, teachers tracking their grades and stuff like that. So I was into software for about 4 years before I went to college. I was pretty sure I was going to be in engineering already, so I wasn't trying to find myself in. So I pretty much knew what I wanted to do. So this all came about from my mom was a science teacher and my dad was a lawyer. Unfortunately, I'll get into my background a little bit more. I didn't like people a lot, so I wasn't going to be a lawyer. I didn't like arguing. I hated, arguing with people. I'd much rather be, playing around with stuff, taking stuff apart. And so I gravitated more towards science, and that's how I became an engineer. So, before I get started, I have to give a legal disclaimer. Everything I say here is going to be my opinion, not my employer. I work for a company called Microchip Technology in Chandler, Arizona. How many of you heard of Intel? Intel inside the CPU. Yeah, inside your computers, there's these processors, even the Macintoshes. They're made by this company called Intel. That's one of the major employers in Chandler. We were one of the others. So my employer is not responsible for my comment. Nothing in this presentation reflects my employers. This presentation does not reflect the view of our school district, even though I invited myself kind of, and my sister invited me here. Nothing should be considered legal or financial advice. So take it as you will. It's my opinions, and my opinions only. All right. So it's broken into 3 parts, and I don't have a lot of time. I gave this presentation this morning, had an hour and a half, so I'm going to kind of talk a little bit fast. So if there's something that you don't understand or you have a question, just feel free to interrupt me, and we'll just handle it that way. Get your questions in. So the first section is all about me and the cool stuff I've done. Second part is going to be about engineering mostly. And we'll have a little bit of discussion about how to become an engineer yourself if you're interested in doing that. All right, so I'm an electrical and computer engineer. As I mentioned before, it's a combination of computer science and electrical engineering, so I do both software and hardware. I've been working at Microchip for about 16 years total as a senior technical staff engineer. I left about 7 years ago, to start my own company called Omni Silicon Technology, and I spent 5 years doing that. We never got funded. We went out to Silicon Valley, tried our hardest, but apparently we had to suspend operations 2 years ago. And so I went back to Microchip. They were happy to have me back. When I got out of grad school, the first company I worked for was Motorola SPS. How many have heard of Motorola? It kind of doesn't exist anymore. So it became Freescale, and now it's called a company called NXP. Before that, when I was in grad school, I worked for a company called GTRI. They're a defense contractor. And because I liked eating every day when I was a grad student, I had to get a job, and that's where when I was undergrad, I interned at Hewlett-Packard in Palo Alto, California, basically Silicon Valley, at HP Labs and HP Corporate. And they also had another site in Corvallis, Oregon, with an HP workstation group. How many of you ever used an inkjet printer, HP inkjet printer? Yeah, that's where they make those. So workstations, inkjet cartridges, inkjet printers, and a calculator, HP calculator. How many of you heard of HP calculator? HP 48G, yeah, that's old school stuff, yeah. All right, so at Microchip, I worked in several different roles. I started out in stem cell library development. Basically, when you build chips, they're basically built like Legos. So the small blocks are called standard cells, and you put them all together, and that gives you a whole chip. So I spent most of my time doing that early on. Then I switched to a different group, working on low power, battery powered products called XLP, extreme low power. How many of you ever used a computer mouse Yeah, pretty much everybody. We have about 98, 99% of the market microchip. 98% of the market. So pretty much every mouse you buy in the United States will have a microchip microcontroller inside. How many of you have a mouse that's older than 4 years old? Yeah. So if you bought an older mouse and you kept it around, the battery lifetime has steadily gotten longer and longer and longer as we've improved technology. That's my stuff inside this mouse. The low power makes the battery lifetime longer, and we spent several years working with companies like Logitech and Microsoft to make those last longer. Let's see, we'll skip along here. So semiconductor device engineer, how many of you have heard of a company called TSMC? Yeah, that's pretty rare. Most chips aren't made in the United States anymore. So there's a company called Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing. It's in Taiwan, just off the coast of China. We have our battleships going back and forth between there, fighting them about it, making sure we can get our chips out of Taiwan into the United States and not into China. But that is probably the world's largest manufacturer. They have about 80% of the market. So all the chips that come out of your Mac, that go into your Mac, go into the Apple iPhone, and a large majority, not all of the Samsungs, but a large majority of the Samsungs have TSMC chips in them. Okay, so I've worked with customers, Microsoft, Logitech, I mentioned the mouse, nice. Ford, BMW, Tesla, Bosch, Energizer. We had over 120,000 customers, unique customers at Microchip. When I started, they had about 60,000. So it's gone up quite a bit over the years. First cool project, how many people have played Guitar Hero? Yeah, okay, so I'm not that old. It's still an old game. Basically, inside this controller, where you put your fingers on, there's a little chip inside that tells when you pressed the button, how long you held it, are you pressing the right order, that type of thing. Flashing the lights and everything, and communicating to the game console, you know, PC or PlayStation or whatever. Second project, Motorola StarTAC cell phone. Who has the original StarTAC Captain Kirk flip phone? That was one of my first standard cell library projects when I got out of grad school and went to Motorola. They hired me straight out of grad school. It's in 0.35 micron technology. Basically, it's about fifth of a width of a human hair. Critical dimension. And again, standard cell libraries are like Lego blocks that you put together to build chips. My chip went into that one. The original, talk about two-way pagers. Who has ever seen a two-way pager? You guys are really, have you seen a pager? The regular pager was just, you know, someone sends you a number and you run to a cell phone, put a payphone and put a quarter in and call them back. Two-way pagers, you can just, almost like texting. Have you ever heard of the Razr flip phone? It's basically a little bit more modern, but still a flip phone, Captain Kirk style. One interesting thing about this is that Motorola made a special one-off edition. They sent it to the Pope in Italy. It was a white phone, and rumor was they put God's number inside and so you could speed dial God. So that's my one corny joke I have. All right. I'll have other corny jokes. We'll keep it to a minimum. Another project I worked on was the F-15 radar warning receiver. As I mentioned, when I got to grad school, I liked eating every day, so I needed a job, but I was concerned about being involved in defense projects where my work would be involved in killing other people. So I justified it in my head that the radar warning receiver protected the pilots. It wasn't directly involved in defense or military action. And basically the idea is that the warning receiver lets the pilot know when he's being attacked, and so he can react in time. Right. So other cool projects. Here's a pop quiz. Who knows what this first device is? GameCube. GameCube. What about the one next to it? All right.
The Wii.
Wii. What about you?
Xbox 360.
360, all right, you got the right one. Yeah, not your regular Xbox, 360.
PlayStation
2?
Yeah,
3, yeah. What do those all have in common? Does anyone know?
Video game console.
Okay, very true. I'll give you that. Yes, they're all video game consoles. They all use the same processor inside, or similar processor design inside. I was involved with a project at Motorola called the AIM project, a consortium of Apple, the I was IBM, and M was Motorola. We all got together and we agreed to make a computer architecture called the Power PC or Power ISA. That went into all those different PlayStation, or all different game systems. The problem is, none of those can run the same software. So even though they have all similar architecture, you cannot run code on a PlayStation that's in a Wii U or Wii. That's the way they decided to have it done, to make you buy their system as opposed to their competitor system. So unfortunately, that happens. When we were designing this as engineers, we didn't know what the end product was going to be. So we knew we were designing this chip, but we didn't know what it was going to run into. And the reason they do that is related to engineering ethics, and we'll talk more about ethics a little bit later. But the short story is, if you're an engineer working on a product, and you buy stock in Sony, if you want to short that stock to make money, basically counting on the stock to go down, I can delay my work on that chip, make the Sony PlayStation come out after Christmas because my project was late, short the stock because their stock went down, and I make money, but Sony loses out. So, is that an ethical thing for an engineer to do? Even for software? Believe it or not, it happens, unfortunately. So other projects, this is the HP Snake workstation. When I worked on the IOs for that, for my first actual chip designs I worked on. Little kids' shoes, smoke detectors. Smoke detectors now have a 10-year lifetime. Used to be able to change the battery every year, 6 months to a year. Every New Year's you go in and change your batteries. Now they can last 10 years, and that's part of our work to make the XLP extremely low power, to make those things last much, much longer. Circuit breakers, uninterruptible power supplies from Schneider Electric, both do similar functions, basically stopping electricity shocks, bolts, surges from damaging your equipment. The computer mouse also has microcontrollers inside. We talked about that earlier. 3D printers, I don't know if you can see that is supposed to be a refrigerator, range, microwave, and a dishwasher, as well as a washing machine and dryer. In the lab at work, we could actually take our laundry to work and test out and do laundry at work if we wanted to, while testing out our chips at the same time. Who knows what this last picture is?
Is that a secret?
What's that again?
A secret?
A seeker. Yeah, that is a Predator drone.
I don't know that one. 'Cause
Barack Obama threatened to shoot his his daughter's boyfriend, so they got out of hand with the Predator drone. It's basically what they use in wartime to avoid risking pilots. It can carry missiles and attack tanks without having a pilot be in jeopardy of being shot down. We put about 40 chips inside. It has a lot of subsystems, but we have about 40 chips inside that, the original. There are later models that have fewer chips. All right. So moving on. My education journey. So I got a PhD in 1997 at Georgia Tech, and we'll go backwards in time. I taught taught classes for computer science engineering majors, linear circuits labs for undergraduate EEs, as well as doing research on the F-15 for the GTRI. To pay for all that, I got a GEM Graduate Engineering Minority Fellowship. It's a private fellowship program, and it paid for most of my school, about half. The rest was on me. So my research was in low power and energy efficient digital circuits and systems. Basically it means making your chips use less battery power. So I went to Texas A&M, focused on reconfigurable, adaptable computer architectures. Basically it's related to AI, having your computer be able to adapt. Instead of just doing one thing, like flashing a little kid's shoe, you could do multiple things. Instead of just being a CPU for your computer, it could also be something else. In addition to just working in your computer. So I went to Fayetteville for my undergrad, but I transferred from Carnegie Mellon when I first got out of high school. And as I mentioned, I went to high school at Parkview High School in Little Rock, Arkansas. And that is me. Yes, I used to have hair. When I was a little kid, I used to have a big, full-on afro. You have a question?
What was it like in university?
Which one? I went to a lot of them.
Well, just like a rough, like a mix of all of them. Like, what is the basis?
Let's just start from the beginning. So you as a high school student going into college, is that kind of what you're asking, what you're going to see?
Yeah, like.
Okay, yeah. Particularly in engineering, I can speak to the engineering side of things. It's a lot more intense high school experience. You will meet a lot more people who are very driven and focused on what they want to do. You will also meet people who are just trying to find themselves. So particularly in a university setting where you have multiple majors and not just like a university is different from an institute of technology. So like Georgia Tech, everybody there is either engineer or science or business. There's no arts, there's no writing, there's no literature, no poetry, none of that. It's all hard sciences there. Universities, they have everything. So at a university, you'll meet a broader range of people, various interests, all walks of life around the country. Similar things at a Institute of Technology, except for everybody's focused on hard sciences. Personal life, a lot more parties and frats at university as opposed to, they have frats at Georgia Tech, but everybody's pretty much about business there. They're very serious focused students there. If you go to a competitive school like MIT or Princeton, Yale, any of the upper echelon, highly ranked schools, you will meet people who have either went to private school and who have actually had teachers who had PhDs teaching them while in high school, versus some people who have come from public schools and had almost no exposure to calculus or anything like that before. So you'll meet a wide range of people. And you'll get out of it what you put into it. So if you focus on learning how to learn, you'll be successful. And that's what I want to emphasize here in this class. In high school, you're building the foundation for your future. In this program, you'll learn how to learn and how to grow going forward. You'll have to keep doing that even more as you go along. One thing I want to mention, I mentioned this in the earlier session. You've ever heard of Elon Musk? Peter Thiel? Yeah, okay. Peter Thiel's another billionaire. They have been promoting on the internet, Facebook, that students don't need to go to college. They already have degrees and they're billionaires. Now, are you going to take the advice of a billionaire who has a college degree already, telling someone who probably isn't a billionaire not to go to college?
Not really.
It does bring it into question though, right? And so I would encourage you to think independently. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but think independently and where your information comes from as you guys consider your options for the future. All right, enough of embarrassing of myself. All right. So I got my first computer in 5th grade. I learned BASIC and assembly language by 8th grade. I got an Apple IIe for my birthday that year, and I started hacking with a dial-up modem. How many of you have ever heard of store Dillard's? Yeah, you heard it? They used to have a data center in downtown Little Rock.
Still do.
They still do? Okay, don't talk about it. We actually broke into Dillard's on my system. We were able to create our own Dillard's charge cards accounts. So I am not going to incriminate myself. I'm just saying that happened. So rather than going to a life of crime, I got hired by the CEO of Sonari Systems. And I mentioned that she's a former Montessori teacher, had a startup in Little Rock, Arkansas. So she was looking for talented computer programming students in high school to work for her to write software for teachers, nurses, and other high school students when I was in 10th grade. So I became a professional programmer in 10th grade. So about software, I was going to a class at Euler to learn PL1 because they didn't offer a class in a language called Pascal. That's where I met her.
Teachers, it's now time for the third group for the afternoon. That would be A16, Ms. Ramos, Mr. Booker, and Mr. Moore classes at this time, from 2:30 to 2:55. Thank you.
Okay. So Sonari had a contract with Euler to teach both high school and elementary students in the summer school program. And one of the classes that I was teaching, I had a group of 6 girls. And in that group of 6 was one little girl, her name was Chelsea. Who knows who Chelsea Clinton is? Say it loud, come on.
Bill Clinton's daughter?
Bill Clinton's daughter.
I went to school with her.
Yeah, she got kids now. Man, that makes me feel old. But yeah, she was in my class, and I had these little skinny girls, and I had to teach them how to program in a language called Logo. They also had these plainclothes state troopers outside the building for security for obvious reasons. Also, during that time, I helped my dad's law firm write code. That's how he paid for the Commodore PET. Back in 1980, when I got that, that computer cost about $1,000. In today's dollars, it's about $3,800, just under $4,000. So yeah, for a computer with only 4K of RAM and 1 megahertz, supposed to gigahertz probably. All right, so in high school, I graduated 4th in my class out of a class of 305, and I took AP Calculus, AP Physics, and AP English, and I was accepted at Stanford, Washington University in St. Louis, Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh, and I didn't get into MIT even though I applied. Now, that's not saying that I was a really good high school student, but here's the flip side of that. By the end of my sophomore year at CMU, I had a 1.8 GPA. Yeah, big drop. So, during that time, my dad's law practice filed for bankruptcy. My parents' home was foreclosed. They moved in with my aunt. My aunt's house then caught on fire later. All total, my parents paid about $5,000 for my first semester tuition. Tuition at Carnegie Mellon at that time was $10,000 a year, so I was only able to get 1 semester paid for it. That didn't include food or housing. Also, my dad decided, for some reason, for a few years, he wasn't going to file taxes, which made me ineligible to apply for financial aid. How many have heard of the FAFSA form? Yeah, if you haven't, you'll hear about it. So you get close to college, you'll have to use the FAFSA. It comes out in December. So I had to work 2 jobs, Friday night shifts, in the computer lab. I moved from PCs and Macs to workstations. How many of you have heard of Steve Jobs? Yeah, Apple guy. You know he got fired from Apple? Steve Jobs was kicked out from the board of Apple, and they fired him. He went and formed another company called Next Computer. How many of you used Mac OS before? They're all on these machines. That operating system was originated from another operating system called Mach that was created at Carnegie Mellon. And that was written by students, undergrads, not high school, but when you get to college, computer science majors. They wrote that software, at least the base part of it. And they took that and they made it into a commercial product that now becomes Mac OS. So I failed a key class for EE called electromagnetics. It was taught by this department head. He oversaw the entire undergraduate program. So when you first go to college and you meet the department head for your undergrad, that was the guy. He taught that class. He was the gatekeeper for the electrical engineering program. After I failed that class, he told me I should consider not being an electrical engineer and switching my major. Really nice guy. So I went to my advisor with the form in hand saying, okay, I can't be an electrical engineer. This guy doesn't like me. I'm a terrible engineer. My life sucks. I want to switch to being a physics major. And my advisor happened to be my freshman physics professor. He looks me in the eye and says, Marcus, I am not signing that. But you are an engineer. I know you're an engineer. You don't want to be a physicist. Stay an engineer. I'm like, okay, so what am I going to do now? I can't switch because my department head won't let me, but my advisor won't sign the form. So basically what we wound up doing is so each department has, well, most departments, have their own version of electromagnetics. So there's a physics electromagnetics, there's a mechanical engineering electromagnetics class. He allowed me to take the physics electromagnetic class and still pass. Unfortunately, the department head kind of protested, so we had to escalate it all the way up to the dean to get it approved. So it's still accredited, but we had to basically go around the department head's head. So the lesson from that is don't take the first no. Don't take the second no. Keep pushing if it's something that you really believe in. All right. So let's talk about engineering here. It's basically getting paid to solve problems. Sometimes for profit. Some people work for nonprofits, but they still get paid. The major engineering disciplines are civil, mechanical, chemical, electrical, industrial, and aerospace. There are other subspecialties, but they're all variants of the other 6 at the top. They all require math and a hard science background. So definitely starting at calculus, you need to have at least be ready to take calculus when you go into college. If you're not at that level, you can always take classes to catch up and get ready for that level and still make it out in 4 years. You just won't have as many electives. Let's see. So engineers tend to be optimists if they had the money. So if I had infinite amount of money, I could make a really nice computer. On the other hand, we spend a lot of time thinking about what can go wrong and getting paid to prevent it from happening. So cars crashing, airbags deploying, things like that nature, we try to figure out how to make brake systems work all the time, 100% of the time, and not fail. So we think creatively about how to break stuff and how it can fail over time. That's what we're paid to do, and we try to stop that from happening. So it requires a lot of creative thinking, like what ifs, what happens if it breaks, and we try to make the impossible possible, and ensuring that everything that can go wrong doesn't go wrong. So, culture-wise and ethics, only facts, measurements, and observations matter. Although people have their own political views, religion, sexual orientation, ethnic background, they really don't matter as far as the projects you work on and your work environment. No one cares what your religion is when your bridge falls down that you built. People die or can die, property gets damaged. It's very expensive. Your cell phone doesn't charge. You don't care who built it. You just say, fix my stuff. Okay? Engineers make choices. Often that can mean the difference between life and death. And usually that boils down to money. Until the federal government had to get involved to have seatbelts installed in cars. The car manufacturers would not have done that unless the federal government made them do it because it costs money. Same thing with airbags and a lot of other safety-related stuff that you see in your life. So how much is it worth to make sure that planes don't crash? I mean, Boeing obviously has to make planes that they can sell, but they have to make it at a price that they can sell it for. But what if that means trading off cheaper aluminum parts that may eventually break sooner than if they put more money into it? That is an engineering choice that they make all the time, which engineers sometimes have to sleep with. You're always making business value judgments versus risks, and there are all sorts of examples of that. Finally, engineering is the only licensed profession with an ethical code that does not have a legally enforceable name. So anybody can go out and call themselves an engineer. I can be a software engineer, I can be a sanitation engineer, and not have to have a license. If I'm going to be calling myself a professional engineer, that's when you have to have a PE license. So let's talk about that a little bit. So engineering is one of the few careers where you work on a team, but are mostly judged by your individual efforts. We're paid well, except unless you're going to be in a university setting, they don't get paid that great compared to industry. Entry-level salaries, well, in most places in the country, will put you in solidly in the middle to upper class range, about $80,000 to $150,000 a year on average nationwide. So not a bad living. That's straight out of college, bachelor's level. U.S. engineers make 2 to 5 times what other engineers make internationally on average. That's kind of a broad range. But you will compete against them. So U.S. engineers must constantly justify their costs or risk losing their jobs to engineers in those other countries because they work for less. And that's just economics. One thing is specialized engineers, like petroleum engineers. If you've ever heard of a petroleum engineer, those are the guys that are out on the oil wells, digging in the ground, looking for oil, trying to prevent oil spills and pumping it out and making lots of money. It's a dirty, nasty job, but they get paid a lot for it. It can be pretty interesting because you get to do both geology and mechanical engineering, kind of, and can make a lot of money doing it. One point I want to point out is ethnic minorities and females are rare in engineering, but it's not uncommon. There are organizations like NSBE, the National Society of Black Engineers, SHIP, Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers, and SWE, the Society of Women Engineers. All have high school outreach programs, so even now, if you're interested, Google those, and you can find out if there are any local activities, local things that you want to get involved, or even some of the regional stuff that they have conferences that you can attend, and they'll help pay for it, for you to attend. Engineers tend to be politically moderate to conservative. That's kind of the nature of the job. We tend to try to, right, so how to be an engineer? You must get an accredited engineering degree. Now this is kind of important, because if you apply to X school, they're accredited when you start. They lose their accreditation by the time you end. You will not have an accredited degree, and you cannot become a professional engineer. Yes, question?
What's the difference between a regular and an accredited engineer degree?
Very good question. Accredited means It has been the school, the university's engineering program, whatever one you're in, mechanical, civil, that particular program has been reviewed and evaluated by this accreditation board, basically called ABET. It's an accreditation board for engineering technology. They do engineering technology and engineering programs all around the country. Basically what they look for is how many professors do you have, how many of those professors are professional engineers, and how many students, basically student-teacher ratio, as well as facilities, lab space, computers, everything that you need to have to become a very good engineer. There's a minimum standard that they set. A lot of schools, and unfortunately, HBCUs sometimes have trouble with that. They'll lose their accreditation. Other schools also have problems with that, but just be mindful that when you go into a program, ask them about their accreditation status. And every school, oh, by the way, every school in the country goes through accreditation every 4 to 5 years. They all have to do this. And it's public knowledge of who loses their accreditation, so you can basically do research on the web and find out who's previously lost their accreditation and who has not. You can become a professional engineer without having a bachelor's. It's very hard. It takes about twice as long to do it, so you might as well go ahead and go get a bachelor's degree. If you want to go to grad school, you can't get a master's without one. Well, it's unlikely. You can go direct, but it's a little bit tough. And it's near impossible to go to a PhD program without a bachelor's first. I've seen it done in foreign institutions, but not in the US. Not all college programs are accredited. Let's see, we'll move on. We talked about that already. So I suggest if you can, get a summer job that gives you experience in the area that you're interested in majoring in, even at the high school level. I started out in high school writing software code. It wasn't related to electrical engineering, but it definitely helped me get positions later, because computer engineering is kind of a combination of both. Having relevant experience usually trumps good grades. So if you're a marginal student, if you have relevant experience, no one will ask you about your grades, particularly if you have internships in a directly related area. The only time I actually had to show my grades was when I applied to graduate school. So going from undergrad to master's, and going from master's to PhD, they cared about my most recent 2 years of grades. None of my employers, they all cared about, okay, you wrote software in high school, we'll hire you as an intern. You intern at Hewlett-Packard, we'll hire you as a full-time engineer. Having progressively improving experience will do much more good than having good grades. All right, so you don't have to be a perfect student. I know I definitely wasn't. Take risks and learn from your failures. The caveat on that is do not repeat your mistakes. If you make a mistake, learn from it, try not to repeat it again. That's when you have a little bit of question and getting attention when you repeat a mistake that you've already made, particularly if it's expensive. Never stop learning. Again, you're at the stage now, learn how to learn, particularly in high school. Engineering fields are continuing evolving. We've all seen the advent of AI coming on. All that's going to change everything, and you guys are right on the cusp, and you need to learn how to learn to keep up with that. Make learning a habit. Stay current in your field as best you can. So if you're interested in computer science, teaching, whatever field you go into, you want to try now to start learning about what's going on in your field, so that when you do actually go into your field, you'll have you'll be a lot more attractive employee. Or if you want to go to grad school, be a much more attractive graduate student. Okay, so sticking to ethics. Who knows what ethics means? I think I gave an example of that, yeah.
How good of you are a person, as a person.
Boils down to right and wrong, or personal integrity. No. Is there something that you will not do or not do? Try not to waste your time going to the dark side, doing stuff that's questionable, even if it's in a gray area. That's probably something you want to stay away from. And I'll give a good example of what happened to me. This didn't involve money. So my boss and I were part of a committee. We were designing a chip, or we were designing 2 separate chips. We went into this committee, we were both going to design both chips the same way. My boss wasn't halfway paying attention. He made a mistake in one of his forms. It wasn't fatal, it was just a minor tweak, but it was embarrassing for him to make it, because it looked very different from what we all agreed we were going to do. Mine was fine, we had a review, we got it all signed off. My boss noticed this at the last minute, and he asked me to change my chip design to match his mistake. Not because anything was wrong with my design, but because he didn't want to be embarrassed. Should I have changed, if you were in that situation, would you have changed your design to match his to not embarrass your boss? Now keep in mind, this person has influence over your raises, career advancements, so it's kind of a rock and a hard place, right?
No, not really.
I don't
Really? Let's say you chose not to do it. You incur the wrath of your boss. Your raises get decreased. You get demoted, or even fired.
I mean, then can't you sue?
Too bad for
You
him. I
can, you
don't
can
do
sue,
that.
can't you?
On what grounds?
Mm.
My boss doesn't like. No, that's not.
Doesn't that waste company resources and time?
It-
Project funds? and-
It wasn't fatal.
I'll go
I
get
mean,
some better.
it basically wasn't fatal. It was just embarrassing, professionally embarrassing. So yeah, it still would have worked, just not as well. But yes, waste of time to make it fit right. But since everything still worked, technically he wasn't wrong, just embarrassed. So do you save your boss's embarrassment or sacrifice your personal integrity to make yourself look bad artificially to make him look better and hopefully get benefit out of that? What do you think I did?
I mean,
benefit out of it.
Was it again?
You get a benefit out of it.
I make my boss look very good.
Yeah.
He'd be more inclined to help me, supposedly. Get promoted and give me raises and stuff like that.
What was the company policy though?
They really didn't have, it's kind of a great, there wasn't really anything about it. We just had a committee that we all decided on how we were going to do it, and everybody signed off on it. They all went away, they weren't involved anymore, the rest of the committee members. They wouldn't have noticed it until after the chips got back.
excuse me.
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
have a very simple question.
Sure.
So, do you believe in power, yes or no?
Do I believe in power? So I'm an electrical engineer. Power means something different for me, probably. What you think? You mean like personal leverage or something like
Mm-hmm.
blackmail?
Mhm.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Well, so you still made your boss look good?
What do you think I did?
You have to make your boss look good.
You have to?
I'm talking about you personally.
Okay. So, in the interest of time, no, I did not.
Oh, okay. That's good.
There is a cost to every choice you make. So, I did pay a cost for that.
What's that?
Yeah. Didn't get a highest raise that year. My reviews were very bad. Yeah. One of the advantages of working at a company like Microchip, they have, in addition to your boss reviewing you, you also get reviewed by your peers. So the other committee members knew what happened. So they also were my reviews. So my reviews weren't terrible, but they weren't as good as they could have been. And so instead of saying, like a 2% raise, you get a 1% raise. Because half your review is related to your boss and the other half is related to your peers. So, yeah. So there was a cost to that. All right, definite sad story. We'll move on. So you as high school students, what should you do now? If you know that you're going to go into biomedical, environmental, agricultural, you can take high school biology. If you're going to go into the other 6 fields, regular engineering, biology isn't going to help you very much. And even of the fields that do have a biomedical background, they'll teach you the biology that you need. And I know that's a little controversial for some people here, but hard sciences, particularly in engineering, they do not use biology very much, particularly in lab classes. Physics, chemistry, algebra, trigonometry, geometry, all that'll be useful. Everything except for, let me get ahead of myself. So also learning how to program, C, C++, Perl, Python, MATLAB, BASIC, any computer language. Learn how to code. Even if you don't go into engineering, that's a very useful skill to have. It'll make you a very marketable person. Learn how to use Microsoft Office. How many of you have used Excel and PowerPoint? You will be using that for the rest of your life. I don't think that'll ever go away. I spend most of my time, particularly when doing documentation, using PowerPoint. Learn to write well and write quickly. How many of you have ever done time writing in your English classes? Yeah. That will be a lifelong skill you'll also learn how to use. You'll use it forever.
Every single day.
Yeah. You practice it. The more you practice, the better you get at it. Writing quickly, because you're always going to have deadlines, schedules to meet. Everybody's interested in getting the work done and then documenting at the end. So yeah, that's kind of how everybody rushes to write. And that's you're going to write very quickly. If you take AP classes, they help, but I would suggest that you retake the class at the college level Every school is different. It's a useful technique to pad your GPA. So if you had calculus and you take it again, you are likely to get a better grade in college calculus as opposed to just skipping the calculus 2 or whatever other class you take. Take as much math as you can. For engineering in particular, statistics isn't all that useful. They have aspects in your lab classes, chemistry, physics, they'll teach you enough statistics that you really don't need to take a separate statistics class. Some engineering programs require it, but I would use one of my electives on it. Take as much science as you can. Again, I mentioned skipping biology, chemistry, physics, geology, material science, all the other hard sciences will be useful to you depending on which area you go into. Look at different engineering college courses right now. You can log into Fayetteville's website and find out what classes they require you to take. That can help you guide what you take in high school to fit that program. Research institutions, Princeton, Yale, Harvard, MIT, are all different from public schools or teaching schools like Georgia Tech. You can actually look up faculty members that are doing research in an area that you're interested in and help them get you admitted into that school. Believe it or not, they will do that if you show interest. So conclusion, engineering is a tough field, but grad school is way more fun than undergrad. So once you get through that, you'll have a lot more fun. Engineers make a lot of money relative to other careers. Try to enjoy high school if you can. Take it seriously, work hard because you're laying the foundation for your future. Even though it seems dreary and drudgery right now, the skills you learn now, you will use in the future over and over and over again. So the better you are, the more you learn how to learn, the more successful you'll be in the future. So if you have any other questions, you can reach me at the email address there, and I'll open it for any additional questions. So I kind of figured it'd be quiet. So I had to do this in the last session, just to get people started. So I have a list of questions that people, so I have about 5 minutes. Okay. All right. So what is the best engineering college in the United States? Anybody heard of, go ahead.
Is it the best engineering college?
Uh-huh. What are some famous schools you've heard of? You heard of MIT, Berkeley, Stanford, those? You haven't?
What about the University of Phoenix?
University of Phoenix?
Yeah.
I am from the Phoenix area. Chandler, Arizona is a suburb of Phoenix. University of Phoenix is a for-profit institution, so it's not the same as a public institution or even a private school like Harvard. It is usually meant for people who are working already in their careers and want to earn a degree while they're working at the same time. So it's a different way to get a degree. Not saying it's bad, but usually the degrees that you get from there, initially, wrongly or rightly, they aren't as respected as they would say from Harvard or someplace like that. But you still get to learn the same stuff. There's really no difference. Okay?
Was it one of the universities you attended?
No, I did not go to University of Phoenix.
No, I'm talking about as far as the top engineering school.
No, I went to Carnegie Mellon. So it was, at the time, it wasn't.
But you said Georgia Tech?
Yeah, that was
That's
later.
not one of the-
So undergrad, I went to Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh. At the time, it was about the top 20. It wasn't top 10. It is now, but when I was there, they were trying to be, it was very much a regional, northeast kind of regional school. Since I was there, they have expanded to become a more national school. But for me, I transferred after 2 years because my dad basically went bankrupt, our house burned down, my aunt's house burned, and then we had to get our other house, and so I transferred back to Fayetteville after 2 years at Carnegie Mellon. And then I went from there to Texas A&M for my master's, and then that's when I went to Georgia Tech for my PhD. I was a glutton for punishment. I was already in debt, so I said, I'm in debt already, I'm gonna keep going to get my PhD. So I went to Atlanta, and that's where I got the PhD from Georgia Tech. So yeah, it's a different world if you're going to go the University of Phoenix route. Again, it's more for older people, like if you've gone to military service, or if you've been out of school for a while and you want to come back, but you don't want to go to a university with all the young kids and frat parties and all that. That's a different route to get. Still valid though. Can you have a social life as an engineer? Are we all nerds locked away playing video games by ourselves?
Pretty much.